The set had been buzzing all morning, but no one could quite explain why. It wasn't just another filming day, even though everything looked the same on the surface. Lights positioned with precision, cameras quietly waiting, crew members moving with practiced urgency. Something in the air felt charged, like a storm gathering just out of sight. And then, without warning, it happened. Just 29 minutes earlier, Soo Kai did something no one on set was prepared for. Not the director, not the crew, and certainly not Tan Songyun. It started like any other take. The scene called for emotional tension, the kind that simmers beneath the surface before spilling over. Soo Kai stood opposite Tan Songyun, his posture relaxed but his eyes unusually intense. Those who had worked with him before noticed it immediately. This wasn't just acting. There was something different in the way he held his gaze, something heavier, more deliberate. The director called for silence. Cameras rolled. For a few seconds, everything followed the script. Soo Kai delivered his lines with his usual effortless charm, his voice steady but layered with emotion. Tan Songyun responded just as beautifully, her expressions subtle yet deeply expressive. They had always shared a natural chemistry on screen, the kind that makes audiences believe in every word spoken between them. But then, something shifted. Soo Kai paused. It wasn't in the script. At first, people assumed it was a minor slip. Maybe he forgot a line or needed a moment to recalibrate. But instead of asking for a retake, he stepped closer. Not dramatically, not in a way that screamed for attention, just one quiet step that changed everything. Tan Songyun blinked, clearly caught off guard. Her character wasn't supposed to react this way. Neither was she. And then, he spoke again. But this time, the words weren't part of the scene. There was a stillness that settled over the set, the kind that makes even the smallest sound feel amplified. Crew members froze mid-motion. Someone near the camera instinctively lowered their headset. It was as if everyone sensed they were witnessing something they weren't meant to interrupt. Soo Kai's voice softened, losing that performative edge actors use when delivering scripted lines. What came out instead felt raw, unfiltered. He wasn't acting anymore. No one could say exactly what he said in that moment, not because it was inaudible, but because it felt too personal, too real to reduce to a simple quote. What mattered was the way he said it, the sincerity in his tone, the way his usual composure slipped just enough to reveal something genuine underneath. Tan Songyun didn't respond right away. For a brief second, her expression flickered between surprise and disbelief. It was subtle but unmistakable. She wasn't in character anymore either. The cameras were still rolling, but what they were capturing had nothing to do with the script. There are moments in life that feel suspended in time, where everything slows down just enough for you to realize something important is happening. This was one of those moments. Someone behind the monitor whispered, "Is this still part of the scene?" No one answered, because no one knew. Soo Kai held her gaze, waiting, not for a cue, not for direction, but for her. And then Tan Songyun did something that no one expected. She smiled. It wasn't the bright, camera-ready smile she's known for. It was smaller, softer, almost hesitant, the kind of smile that carries meaning beneath its surface, the kind that says more than words ever could. That's when the set truly fell silent. Even the director, who would normally jump in to maintain control, stayed still. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was respect, or maybe, like everyone else, he simply didn't want to break whatever was unfolding in front of them. For years, fans had speculated about the connection between Soo Kai and Tan Songyun. Interviews, behind-the-scenes clips, subtle glances caught on camera. There had always been something there, something that went beyond professional collaboration. But speculation is one thing, reality is another, and this felt like reality. Not polished, not rehearsed, not designed for public consumption, just real. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds, Tan Songyun finally spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost cautious, as if she were choosing her words carefully. Whatever she said, it didn't carry the dramatic weight of a scripted confession. Instead, it felt grounded, sincere, and deeply personal. Soo Kai listened, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, something changed. The tension in his shoulders eased, the intensity in his eyes softened. Relief, maybe, or something close to it. The director eventually called cut, but it came later than it should have, much later. By then, the moment had already passed, leaving behind a strange mix of awe and uncertainty. No one moved right away. It was as if the entire set needed a second to process what had just happened. And then, almost all at once, reality rushed back in. Crew members began exchanging glances. Some whispered to each other, trying to piece together what they had witnessed. Others simply shook their heads, as if acknowledging that some moments can't be fully explained. Soo-kai stepped back, running his hair through his hair in a rare display of nervousness. Tan Songyun looked down briefly, then back up, her expression composed but thoughtful. Neither of them addressed what had just happened, not immediately. Filming resumed because it had to. Schedules don't pause for emotions, no matter how powerful they are. But something had changed. You could see it in the way they interacted afterwards. Subtle shifts, almost imperceptible, but impossible to ignore if you were paying attention. Their chemistry, already strong, now carried a different kind of energy. It wasn't just about portraying a story anymore. It felt like something deeper had slipped through the cracks of performance and made its way into reality. Of course, word spread quickly. In an industry where even the smallest detail can become headline news, a moment like this was bound to ignite speculation. Within minutes, people who weren't even on set began hearing fragments of the story. A pause during filming, an unscripted line, a reaction that didn't match the script. By the time the first whispers reached fans, the story had already taken on its own life. Some called it a bold confession. Others saw it as a spontaneous expression of emotion, something that wasn't meant to be public, but became so by circumstance. There were even those who questioned whether it had been intentional at all, whether Soo-kai had planned it, or if it simply happened in the heat of the moment. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. What makes moments like this so compelling isn't just the possibility of romance, it's the unpredictability, the idea that even in a controlled environment like a film set, where every word and movement is carefully planned, something genuine can still break through. And when it does, it reminds everyone watching that behind the lights and cameras, these are still real people with real emotions. As the day went on, the atmosphere on set remained subtly altered. Conversations were quieter, more measured. There was a sense of shared awareness, like everyone collectively witnessed something significant and didn't quite know how to talk about it. Soo-kai and Tan Songyun continued working, professional as ever. They delivered their lines, hit their marks, and stayed focused. But every now and then there would be a glance, a pause, a fleeting moment that hinted at what had happened earlier. Nothing overt, nothing that could be easily captured or explained, just enough to keep people wondering. And maybe that's what makes this story so captivating. Not the confession itself, but everything surrounding it, the tension leading up to it, the reactions that followed, the unanswered questions that linger in its wake. Was it planned? Was it spontaneous? What did it really mean? Those questions may never be fully answered, and perhaps they don't need to be. Because sometimes the most powerful moments are the ones that resist explanation, the ones that exist somewhere between reality and interpretation, where meaning isn't fixed, but felt. For now, all anyone knows for certain is this. 29 minutes ago, something unexpected happened on set, something unscripted, something real. And whether it leads to something more or fades into a memory shared only by those who were there, one thing is undeniable. For a brief moment, the line between fiction and reality disappeared, and everyone watching got to witness what happens when emotions refuse to stay within the boundaries of a script. In the hours that followed, the moment refused to settle into something ordinary. It lingered, stretching beyond the set into quiet corners where conversations usually stayed practical and focused. People who had been there replayed it in their minds, each remembering a slightly different version, an extra second of silence, a shift in tone, the way Tan Songyun's expression softened just before she spoke. It's funny how memory works like that. The core of the moment remains the same, but the details bend depending on where you stood, what you felt, what you wanted it to mean. By late afternoon, the set had returned to its routine on the surface. Equipment moved, lines were rehearsed, the rhythm of production picked back up as if nothing unusual had happened. But underneath that routine, there was a subtle current running through everything, impossible to ignore. A few crew members, the kind who had worked in the industry long enough to recognize the difference between performance and reality, kept their observations to themselves. They didn't need to say much. A raised eyebrow here, a knowing glance there, that was enough. They had seen actors blur the line before, but rarely like this. Because this didn't feel like a blur. It felt like a crossing, and crossings once made are hard to undo. Su Kai, for his part, seemed quieter than usual, not withdrawn, not distant, just measured. He laughed when appropriate, responded when spoken to, and stayed engaged with the work. But there was a noticeable shift in his energy,